Hey YouTube! So I actually got a request in the comments of another video to show how I did the scaling for the pieces that I'm making. So that's what I'm going to do here. Um, First things first, there's two things you need to know about. If you go to 2D menu, go to change scale and scale factor. This lets you change the scale. You can see right now my scale factor is 830. Also, if you right click anywhere, you can do measure distance between 2 points. Now the templates I originally got were Shiny's templates from the Obscurus Crusade, and they are actually scaled for a legit Space Marine. Like if you're 8 feet tall and a hulking, genetically modified warrior of the Emperor, it'll fit you just fine. That's the size it's supposed to be. If you're like me and just shy of 6 feet, you'll need to do a little bit of extra scaling work. Or you could be super awesome, make it full size, and figure out how to make yourself fit in there. I wasn't willing to do that. I decided to make it fit me instead. So with those two tools, the change scale and the measure between 2 points, take a look at the piece and figure out what part of your body is going to fit in it and how it should fit in it. So for example, my head has to fit in here. Obviously, the top of my head will be up in here. This should come down to my neck. My nose should be around here. The back of my head should be around here. And obviously, that would be the width of my head. Now, what you can do is you can see the widest point or narrowest point that my head has to fit in is going to be between these 2 points. And that's 193 millimeters. Okay. So then what you need to do is take a tape measure or a ruler and measure your head. If I do that to myself right now and feel silly doing that because, I don't know, it's just weird measuring yourself. I can see my head is about 160 millimeters wide, so I got plenty of clearance there. Obviously, this neck piece can't be used because your neck can fit through things your head can't. Not that you ever run into that situation because it's kind of attached. So I'm fine in that dimension. Now it gets a little tricky because it's not always obvious what points to grab to sort of get an idea of the height here. The reason why is because let's say I measure from the very top here to the very bottom here. Come on, work with me. There we go, it just needed to be coaxed. I mean, that says that is 220.77, so like 220. But that's measuring an angle distance, it's not measuring straight up and down. Sometimes you can't get around it, and you're just stuck with it. And this is basically just to get an idea of how these things will work. So probably the best points to pick here, I'm going to pick this point because it's about the tallest point where my head can fit. And then the shortest point, or shortest angle distance to the bottom is about here. So you can see that's 224. Now it'll actually be a little bit shorter because it'll be a straight down distance, but you know, this is working just off of estimates. If I measure my own head, I can see it is having technical difficulties here. I've also got a headset on, which is not making this any easier. So I can see I'm about 225 actually. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. Which makes sense because my chin does stick out just a tiny bit underneath this. I'm not concerned with it. I'm going to fix that up later without having to resize the piece. So that's not a big deal. And then this is a slightly easier measurement. Where your nose is going to be, or should be, back to where the back of your head will be. That's mostly a straight dimension, so 245. If I try and awkwardly measure that, it's not easy to do. I would recommend having a friend along. I'm not going to bother with this since I don't need it for anything, but that's the way to do it. I definitely recommend asking a friend to help because it's a lot easier to measure pieces of yourself when you don't need to be using both hands to do things. So that is how I've been rescaling stuff. So let's say that you realized you've got an incredibly large head or an incredibly small head. You would go to scale factor, and let's say that you've got a tiny head. Um, you just sort of play around with it. You go down to 830, like from 830 to 800. You can see all the pieces got smaller. And then measure your points again. So from there to there. Now it's 184, and I think before it was 193. So you can see it got a little bit smaller in that dimension. The other dimensions will have shrank proportionally. Everything goes proportionally. If you want to make it larger, like let's say you've got a big head, and you will generally want to make the helmets bigger than you need, just so you've got more room in there to like breathe and stuff like that. So I was at 830. Let's say I wanted to go 850. Measure again. You can see now it's 195, almost 196, which is a tiny bit bigger. Millimeters are small, so you generally have to play around with the scale more than, by 20 or 30. But do that, pardon me, do that until you sort of get a sense of what you need to do to modify them. And that seem to work out the best for me. So if you have any other questions or want more details about this, just leave a comment, let me know, and I will try to explain better. And better yet, specific questions are the easiest because it doesn't leave me having to think up anything. I can just show and answer it. Anyways, that's it. See ya.